Now, without further ado, let's just get straight to the point. So, Brian G. Gilmore is a poet, writer, public interest attorney, and columnist with the Progressive Media Project. He is a Cave Cabin Fellow, Kimbillo Fellow, Literature Fellow for the DC Commission on Arts and Humanities. I'm about to jazz it up for real now. Bush Clark Prize nominee and winner of the Maryland State Arts Council Individual Artist Award. Gilmore, this was in 2002 and 2003. He has been a contributing writer for ebonyandjet.com, Jazz Times Magazine. He's the author of 2 collections of poetry, Elvis Presley is Alive and Well and Living in Harlem, and Jungle Nights and Soda Fountain Rags, poem for Duke Ellington. His poems and writings are widely published and have appeared in The Progressive, The Washington Post, The Baltimore Sun, and many other publications. He teaches law at Michigan State University College of Law, where he lectures and writes on contemporary issues relating to housing and economic inequality, dividing his time between Michigan, which is why you can handle this cold, I guess, and his beloved birthplace, Washington, D.C. And in discussion with Brian today is Junette Pinkney, a proud D.C. native, worked as a print and broadcast journalist for more than a few decades, and she is willing to disclose in Minnesota, D.C., New York, Zambia, and South Africa, among others, CBS and NBC News and the Phil Donahue show. On the side, she also produced literary events for publishing houses such as Third World Press and for Sankofa, promoting Black authors such as Alila Bundles, Ackland Lynch, Walter Mosley, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, and the esteemed Gwendolyn Brooks. Wow. And you can find out how she and Brian first crossed paths on page 123. That's 123. In his new book, No More Worlds to Conquer, The Black Poet in Washington, D.C. Brothers and sisters, round of applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out in this cold and pending or impending. I'm not quite sure which is the right word, Brian. Okay. 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 All right. But thanks for coming out. And before we start, Brian's going to read in just a minute, but I just wanted to ask all of the writers and poets here to just stand up so we can applaud you. Anybody writing or poeting? Come on now. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Thanks for your work. And of course, Brian, thank you for your work. We agreed we would start with your reading some from No More Worlds to Conquer. Let's do that. And then you and I can chat, and then we'll ask the audience to involved in the conversation as well. Brian Gilmore. Oh, but should I tell you how we met? Do you want to tell them? Have to buy the book. Sorry.
That's cool. All right, so Brian Gilmore, thank you everyone for coming out, and especially that it's cold today and things like that. But it's good to see some familiar faces and new faces. I just saw Mark Mealy. I haven't seen Mark Mealy since we were like 3 years old, but I'm joking. No, I haven't seen Mark Mealy in like 25 or some odd years. Although we talk all the time. That's the magic of the new era and things like that. But first and foremost, I want to thank my family, many of whom are here today. My brother Keith, the oldest brother of mine. My wife, Alana Haywood, she's in the house today. And 2 of my daughters are here. Lyric and Panonica are here. Yeah, it was hard work. And I definitely appreciate them. I had to thank them first and foremost because they're the ones that mostly put up with my constant reading and writing over the last 30 some odd years or so. I just read and keep reading and try to write, try to make it all make sense. Also, I want to thank Sankofa Books, the Sankofa family. They kind of like have adopted me in a certain way. I come down here all the time. They treat me like I'm part of the family. And that's very appreciative of me. Holly treats me very well, like I'm his son. I'm good with that. And everyone else who helps put these events together, even when I am in the audience like you all are. I am very, very comfortable. I was first read here in 1995. When my first book came out, Elvis Presley is Alive and Well and Living in Harlem. I was here with big heavyweights like Haki Matabuti and Sonia Sanchez, and they invited me as well. So ever since that moment, I always have felt a special way about this space. And when I knew this book was coming out, I said the first event will be at Sankofa Books, no doubt about it. And
Absolutely.
and we call it, as they call it all the time, the liberated zone, because this place is liberated. We decolonized this part of the block. So I'm gonna read maybe 2 short excerpts from the book, and I'll let everything else come out in the wash, as they say. She can ask me whatever you want, and you all can ask me whatever you want as well, about craft and about the story and about anything. I mean, to tell you the truth, I'm just pleased that everybody's coming. I'm glad the book is finally out in the world, because that's when the building finally began. There's Kenneth Carroll, who is in the book. And there's some other people here who are also in the book as well. Poets Alan King and Derek Weston Brown. They're both in the book as well. So I'm going to read the first part here. And this goes to that whole notion. I'm just read a short part from chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Love Song. And this goes back to that whole thing about a teacher doing something for you, and then it comes to mean something for your whole life. And that's why that's probably why I'm sitting here today, because of a teacher did something for me. Love Song. In the 3rd grade at Jesse LaSalle Elementary, just around the corner from my house in Washington, D.C., I first embraced the poetry of Paul Laurence Dunbar, the Black poet. Mrs. Lewis was my teacher. The entire class was assigned homework. Select any poem, commit it to memory, and then recite it in front of the class. Thinking back, I didn't think much of it. I was shy and didn't like speaking in front of people, but I didn't fret for some reason. After a search through literary paperbacks my father kept in the house, I selected Dunbar's We Wear the Mask. My best friend in the world then, Ronnie Beavers, a schoolmate, picked a Dunbar poem too, Negro Love Song. We went through all the book together. To this day, I can still remember reading the poem. It took me hours to memorize it to the point where I was fearless. We wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile, with torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Paul Laurence Dunbar. My first poetry reading. My first real encounter with the majesty of verse. At the time I read the poem, I didn't know what it meant. Also did not know that Paul Laurence Dunbar had once lived and wrote in the city between 1898 and 1901. Once I found out, the poetry reading meant even more to me. Whenever I read poetry, I again imagine I am standing in front of Mrs. Lewis's class, nervous and excited. Poetry is in my head, hands, head, and heart. People sit attentively and are listening. I think about it even more after I learned of Dunbar's time here and the subsequent connections made. And I'm just going to read another little short section from the first paragraph, first chapter. It is often said that Paul and Alice Dunbar became part of the colored elite of the city of Washington. This seems to be undisputed. It was a unique city for African Americans anyway, even though all the evils that had occurred to most African Americans, such as chattel slavery, segregation, and discrimination, occurred there as well. But the city had its own racial history and customs that allowed many African Americans to carve out a better life. Dunbar, well read and sharp with words, made his singular contribution to the nurturing of African American poetry tradition in the city because of this unique paradox. Dunbar's essay from Harper's Weekly, The Negro in Washington, is one of the best sources over the years for providing an honest depiction of Black life in the city at the turn of the century. Dunbar had no reason to exaggerate or lie. He was not from Washington, D.C., and it wasn't likely he would remain there indefinitely. As a famous poet, a famous Black poet, his presence and readings were in demand. Washington was a city of singular importance when Dunbar was there, and it was particularly important to African Americans. It is delicately blended or boldly differentiated light and shade effects of Washington Negro life that are the despair of him who tries truthfully to picture it, Dunbar writes of the city. His use of light and shade effects seem almost deliberate, contrived, as if Dunbar is telling the reader that there are color and class issues within the race amongst Blacks. It is the middle-class Negro who has imbibed enough of white civilization to make him work to be prosperous. The passage is optimistic, though Dunbar is not so foolish as to forget where he is living. Quote, but he has not partaken of civilization so deeply that he has become drunk and has forgotten his own identity. In these passages, Dunbar is not only musing about African Americans in general, but he is talking about life for Black people in Washington, D.C. Dunbar also uses the piece to specifically identify aspects of life in Washington for Blacks that are, in fact, well known through the African American world at the time. Dunbar clearly observes the daily work of Black women working as servants for privileged whites when he refers to the presence of Black mammies in the nation's capital, something he calls a real bit of the old South. He sees these Black women with laundry work and with a little baby carriage, and notes that they came to the city when it was indeed the Mecca for colored people. There are Black women serving as waitresses as well, according to Dunbar, as he notes observing the old lady who leans over the counter of a tiny and dingy restaurant on Capitol Hill and dispenses coffee and rolls and fried pork to her colored customers. These women are often made fun of, according to Dunbar, as they too are a remnant of the old South, that mythical place that the Blacks of Washington, D.C. seemingly forget still exists and that will always be part of them. In the 14th Street corridor, the streets where Black people were forced to create their own world, Dunbar observes something remarkably different from mammies with laundry and babies or mammies serving as waitresses. Quote, colored men have made money here, Dunbar also writes, and some of them have known how to keep it. Dunbar also notes their power locally, challenging long-held stereotypes of Black failure when he points out that several Black men are on the local board of trade and that a Black man drafted the city's assessment law. Dunbar also is quick to note that the Black community where he lives is a neighborhood of professionals, so many that Dunbar would be too busy counting the Black lawyers and doctors working and living in the city. Dunbar wrote a second essay about his time in Washington, D.C., which also provides a portrait of the city. It appeared in the Saturday Evening Post. By this point, he was essentially gone from the city. Dunbar's official stay was cut due to illness. His work at the Library of Congress, working in the dusty shelves of the country's premier repository of written works, brought on a bout of tuberculosis. Dunbar had spent 15 months working at the library. And I'm going to read one more part, and it's later in the full narrative. Is chapter 9, and it's called Dreams. And this also tries to provide some context because the book moves from Dunbar Dunbar's so-called residency here, literary residency, for about 3 years, and then it comes all the way up into the modern era. But this is the 60s, where the scene here, the poets, the literary scene that they have been building, continues to develop. Dreams. My clearest memory as a very small boy of the assassination of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is of my mother playing the same record album in the days following Dr. King's death. The record was the 1963 March on Washington album with Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech and the African-American spiritual We Shall Overcome. Whether she was relaxing, cooking, cleaning, or ironing clothes, tasks she did religiously, the album played that week over and over in our house. Marita Golden, one of the city's most celebrated literary figures, remembers the assassination of Dr. King as a declaration of war. According to Golden, the response to the killing of Dr. King was an angry cry along the streets, using bricks, bottles, and torches for its song of sorrow. Stokely Carmichael of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was in the city on the night of Dr. King's murder. Carmichael, poet Gaston Neal, and others began going door to door at the shops on U Street, telling shop owners to close their stores because of Dr. King's death. Quote, if Kennedy had been killed, they'd have done it, Carmichael told the group. At around 9:25 p.m., the first store window on 14th and U Street was broken. The riot was on. Gaston Neal, who had put together the New School of African American Thought in 1966 in the heart of the neighborhood, recalled the building where he was living was also burned to the ground. Neal lived in a unit above a store in the U Street corridor owned by a white shopkeeper. Y'all burned me out, the poet Carl Cotter recalls Neal saying. 2 months later, in June 1968, Robert F. Kennedy, the likely Democratic Party nominee for president, was murdered in California. My father understood the moment. As Kennedy's funeral train arrived in Washington, D.C., for him to lie in state in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, my father took my brothers and me down to the railroad tracks near our home with hundreds of other locals to pay tribute as Kennedy's train arrived in the city and passed by. Rebuild. At the same time the city was recovering from the riots, the Drum and Spear bookstore opened downtown in the city. It was an important event then and now historically. There was still tear gas in the air, said Julie Richardson, a member of SNCC and a co-founder of the store. You felt it in your nose. Drum and Spear bookstore officially opened in Washington on June 1st, 1968. It is immediately part of the city's cultural, political, and poetry scene. Black poetry was central to Drum and Spear, Julie Richardson said. Gaston Neal, Charlie Cobb, Sonia Sanchez. The store was a meeting place for Black artists and activists determined to continue the movement against racism in America, according to Richardson. Judy Richardson described it as expanding an awareness of ourselves and of our ability to change the world. Tony Gittins, a former director of the D.C. Commission on the Arts and Humanities, was also a founding member, as was Charlie Cobb, poet and writer and member of SNCC. Gittins also recalls the store's link to Black poets in the city and notes the presence and work of Gaston Neal to make poetry a big deal at the store. According to newspaper sources, the address was Riot Central, 2701 14th Street Northwest, just blocks from where the city exploded only minutes after the post-King assassination melee began. It was, according to descriptions, a burnt-out shop. The Washington Post also referred to the popular cultural meeting ground as a ghetto bookstore that had reached out successfully to an untapped literary market. The presence of SNCC was no accident. SNCC had come to D.C. to bring democratic change to the city. Gaston Neal, while not a SNCC member, was politically aligned with them. Neal's recently founded New School of African American Thought was right on the same block as the store. Richardson said Neal's presence was simply part of what we did at Drum and Spear. The store provided books one would not otherwise find in other stores, specifically books written by Black authors. Marita Golden called the store an important cultural beacon during the 60s and 70s, and crucial as a part of the Black arts and consciousness movement. Golden grew up right in the neighborhood where the bookstore opened. Golden also wrote poetry back in 1968 as a student at American University. Golden said Drum and Spear was a panorama of genius and endurance. Its wide selection of Black and African books motivated her to write bristling Black poetry that sizzled on the page. Lerma Rackley, a journalist writing for Evening Star, called the Drum and Spear bookstore a laboratory of Blackness, describing the store's walls as decorated and covered in moving and colorful paintings by and about Black people. Simba Sana, who would one day become part owner of a very successful Black-owned bookstore chain in the D.C. area called Caribou Books, and who wrote his M.A. thesis at Howard University on the importance of Black bookstores, devoted commentary and research to Drum and Spear. The importance of African-centered bookstores as warehouses of Black literature is directly linked to attacks on Black culture by mainstream America. Sana wrote in his theses, while Drum and Spear only lasted into the 70s, it forever planted the notion that Black bookstores were wanted and needed in African-American communities. They served as community spaces where Black people could celebrate Black culture. The bookstore was also noteworthy to J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. According to Joshua Clark Davis, Drum and Spear bookstore in Washington, D.C. seems to have drawn more scrutiny from the Bureau's agents than any other Black bookstore in the country. The fact that it had been established by veterans of SNCC didn't help matters. And the fact that the revolutionary Stokely Carmichael visited the store made it a target of Hoover's COINTELPRO. In addition, plainclothes agents regularly visited the store, and from 1968 until the store's closing in 1974, the Bureau compiled nearly 500 pages of investigative files on Drum and Spear. And I will stop there with those two excerpts, and just to provide some context. The narrative, it's just a narrative story. I would say it's not the story, it is a story. And it starts with Dunbar. And you're basically in the post-Plessy period, the lowest of the low period. This is when your own governments basically said you're worthless. I mean, your life and your rights mean nothing to them. And so that's where it starts. And then it moves through the 20th century, all the way up until right now. Sort of almost right now is when the narrative ends. And my effort was to try to tell the story with the politics as a backdrop, and also to tell the story through the actions and, what the poets were doing and what the poets were writing and how they were organizing themselves in the world. And that's what I hope people would take away from the book. And it's an ongoing story, which is why I called out Derek Weston Brown and Alan King and other poets who coming up, because they're now like the next group who are hitting their stride, shall we say, and and then there's some people behind them who are trying to hit their stride, and that's why this will work, especially in Washington D.C., because that's what it's all about. We are a dynamic Black poetry community, and I think that's what I try to bring out in the book. So I'll turn it over to the moderator for any questions. So I think I see my friend Mo Jefferson. Is that Mo Jefferson back there?
Before we take questions from the audience, I just wanted to ask you, Brian, what motivated you? And I should say, I think of you as primarily a poet. What motivated you to write this for people who haven't seen it? This is what the book looks like. What motivated you to do the heavy lifting and the writing of No More Worlds to Conquer? And tell us something about the title, please, after you answer the first question.
Okay, so I mean, I would just say I like to write. I mean, the fact that I'm a poet is just, it was just, I won't say it's accidental, but Kenny Carroll will probably tell you, my preference would be to write short stories, just write stories. I like stories. In fact, I think the most fascinating thing about poetry and short stories is the story behind the story. To me, that's what I really want to know. I mean, I'm more fascinated with, yeah, that song by Aretha Franklin. That's a fabulous song. But I want to know the story behind the story of her song. I want to know why did she write the song and what the song is about and who the dude she dogging in the song and stuff like that. I want to know the story behind the story. I'm obsessed with that, and that's the reason why I've always been attracted to this kind of thing here. So the story itself, though, is kind of accidental. I was just a poet and freelance writer, which is what we do. Poets almost always end up being like freelance writers. And so what ended up happening was Marcia Davis and I were in contact then. She's a writer. She was an editor at the Washington Post. And Langston Hughes' birthday was coming up. And I had written for her before at other places. And I just pitched the idea to her. I said, Langston Hughes' 100th anniversary is coming up. I said, somebody should do something about that, because Langston Hughes lived in D.C. from 1924 to 1926, and then he was here a couple more times. Why don't somebody write something about that? And she's like, go ahead. So I wrote that, and it got published in the style section when the Washington Post was not the Amazon Post. And I mean, it was like, I was really pleased at that to write a piece. And it's just, the article is what I've just said. It's a story behind the story. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. Like, why did Langston Hughes come to live here? I want to know. I just obsessed with that part of it. He was here again in the 50s because he got called here from the House Un-American Activities Committee, and they said he's a communist, and they made him testify in Congress. So he was here again. And then he was here another time. He came to speak at a very exclusive private, yeah, it is elusive, private school out in Virginia, girls' private school out in Virginia. And I found out that he spoke there. And so I wanted to know that story. So I wrote the article, and that article was very successful. And that kind of began this journey with this book here. And I didn't think it was going to be a book. I just kind of like said, you know what? If I find anything else out, I need to just save it. And this is a lesson to anybody out here who wants to do research and wants to write. If you find something out, if you want to find something out, start keeping everything. I mean, literally everything. And it's even easier now. When I started out, you had to actually go to the actual library. You know what I mean? You had to actually pick up the landline and call somebody, and then they would say, oh, yeah, that guy don't live here no more. But if you call this guy right here, he might know where he is. Those kind of things I had to do back then to like write articles like that. But now it's easy. You can just go Google alerts. You can just do all kinds of things, and you can do your research, a lot of it, half of it at least, sitting in your living room, or that kind of thing. So that's the answer to that. Now, as for the title, No More Worlds to Conquer is a poem by Sterling A. Brown, the one of the greatest poets in the history of the United States, history of the world, intellectual giant like W.E.B. Du Bois, and on that level, that's what level he is on in terms of culture, literature, politics. He knows it all. I mean, knew it all. The only reason why a lot of people haven't heard of him is because he taught at Howard for many, many years, and he devoted himself to his students. He devoted himself to teaching. He devoted himself to scholarship, but and also at his university didn't like him so much because he didn't bite his tongue. He didn't bite his lip. He didn't care. He knew what he was talking about, and they say, "Why don't you not say that so loud? Why don't you tone that down, man? You talking bad about us, calling us names." He's like, "I ain't calling you names. You call yourself a name. You know what I mean? Because of the way you conducting yourself." But John Thompson, the basketball coach, used to say, "I didn't take you out the game. You took yourself out the game. You went out there doing what you're doing. So, but it's a poem by Sterling Brown. It's in his collected poems, which is probably on the shelf. No More Worlds to Conquer. When I saw it, I said, that's the name of the book. I did. I didn't have a title when I pitched this to Georgetown University Press. I said, but that's the name of the book. Because what Sterling was saying over and over in many of his other writings is, you know, we are, when we put our mind to it, we can defeat this. We've proven over and over and over that we can defeat this beast that's trying to get on our back all the time. He said that. So I thought that was appropriate for poets that, you know, in DC at least, I feel like the Black poetry scene always knows what it wants to do, always knows what it wants to say, and always is in control of itself. They tried to segregate us and they tried to keep opportunities away from us, but we continue to reshuffle the deck and we continue to win. At least that's what I know this. I can tell you this for a fact. We continue to thrive on our own terms on our scene. The community we have built, I believe it's the strongest Black poetry community in the United States. I've been all over. I'm not bragging because I'm from here. I'm just stating this as there's historical evidence for this. I mean, the Harlem Renaissance is, like Sterling Brown said, they call it the Harlem Renaissance because that was more sexy to sell the books and to sell the poets. But all them people in the Harlem Renaissance was DC folks, or they taught at Howard, or they were poets at Howard. They were living in DC, all of them. Alain Locke, who concocted the whole thing, was teaching at Howard. But if they would have said the DC Renaissance, they would have been like, oh, nah, man. we need like a sexy name. So it's the Harlem Renaissance. All right, y'all can have that. You know what I mean? But everybody knows what that was about. And people probably I tell a similar story in the book about the Black Poetry Fellowship thing, Cave Canem. The Black poets of DC went to Cave Canem in the second year, energized that. You know what I mean? And said, this is the life of the poet. This is a poetry community. This is how you support each other. This is how you're there for each other. Because it's going to be tough. It's tough to write poetry. It don't pay that well. Everybody tell you that. It's tough to write poetry. People need support. So I think I went on too long.
No, it's okay. I would just mention that Sterling Brown's house, which I think is on Kearney Street, if I'm not in Brooklyn, there's a plaque on it. It's owned now. Well, I don't know if it's still owned, but the last time I was there a few years ago, a sister owned it, and there's yeah. She's still there. Okay. Did you want to say more, or are you ready for us to take some questions?
Somebody got
hand. Can we get a mic to that person? Got another one? Okay.
I don't need no mic. I do. But the filmmaker here.
And say your name and tell us a couple things about you, please. We need you to use the mic since it's being recorded, so you don't just become a hollow voice.
Gilmore.
Mr. Gilmore property.
I think it's got feedback. But first of all, I want to say, book is great, but then I'm your friend. I probably would have said that to you anyway. But the book is great and important. But Gilmore, you can choose to answer this or not, but I've been thinking about you for the last week or so and your family with the passing of your mom. And I remember the last time I saw your mother, Mike, brought her over to American Poetry Museum where you were reading. Talk about her importance. You always talk about your family and their importance in bringing you to the art. Talk about your mother's importance in bringing you to be a writer in general.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that question.
Was that Kenny Carroll?
Kenneth Carroll.
I can't read, but I need a voice. Okay.
Kenneth Carroll asked that question. So thank you once again for asking that question. Yeah, my mother passed away on January 13th. She was 95 years old. she was, great thing to say, she was a graduate of Paul Laurence Dunbar High School, class of 1948. And so she had that, and there's a whole story in there about how they decided to name the school after Dunbar. Because it wasn't no small thing that Dunbar had come here. And it's two aspects to my parental development in my family. My brother is here. He'll tell you, like, oh no, we grew up in an intellectual home. You know what I mean? You had to have opinions on politics and all that, and they was going to call you up. My father would come in your room and hand you an editorial from the Washington Post and say, yeah, go ahead and read that, and we'll discuss that later.
And you were what age at this point?
I mean, you can't tell you. I mean, we were like, this is before we were like 10. I mean, that kind of thing. There was no doubt about it. My mother they read the Washington Post religiously. They read books. They talked about the issues of the day. My mother was more on the cultural side, children and community side. My father was more on the political side, but I consider them both intellectuals. And if it was a different time, my mother probably would have went on to be a school teacher. In fact, she thought about becoming a school teacher, but as time it is, you gotta work, help support your family. Not us, her mother and her father. She was living with them at the time, so it was just a different time, 1950s. And but the two aspects of it is my mother's the one that taught me to read and to love the word. She used to read to us from Reader's Digest. We would just be sitting at her feet and she would be reading from, I'm talking about, she ain't read you from Reader's Digest. She reading from the front to the end. She gonna say, okay, next we're gonna go over these questions and read it. Oh man, this is wild, man. Who are these people? This is real intense here. But I like the word. And so she taught me the love of the word. Love to read and write. My father taught me what kind of, because he used to have these books, like I said in my excerpt, he said these books laying around the house, like just tons and stacks of these paperbacks. I said, well, how do you get all these paperbacks from? And there was just, I don't know where he got them from, but it'll be like Autobiography of Malcolm X, Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, Up from Slavery. I remember one time, I think I said to him, I hadn't read Up from Slavery and I was older. He said, what do you mean you ain't read Up from Slavery? Let me give you a copy. Next thing you know, I was reading Up from Slavery. But when I mean that is, yes, he was reading that. But my father also was a student of the West, the people who were doing the terrible things to us. He would have me read Rousseau, people like that. He had me read John Locke. He wanted me to understand the system that had come to try to pass itself off as legitimate on us and use that. He said, you got to know this stuff. You got to know what a social contract is. You just got to know it. Even though if you think it's crooked, you got to know it. You got to know what democracy is. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to fight it. Democracy is not the system. Democracy is a system that somebody came up with. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong. But he said you're going to have to understand these things. So he was very well read on the West, very well read on the Black side. I mean, my mother would read literally almost anything. She just liked to read a lot and write. But I keep thinking I'm going to find some diary upstairs or journals or something like that. But that combination of them two coming at us like that, I think that's why our home is the way it is. And still to this day, I mean, they just felt like you should have an opinion. You should care. You should care about being educated. I could remember my father taping himself, taping his speeches. He would tape himself before he gave a speech and then he would play it back. I said, man, he played that joint back like 45 times. It sounded all right to me. Maybe I should go in there and tell him this. But that was his thing. This was the days of tape recorders and stuff. And then, like I said, my mother was the one though that taught me the love of the word and the love to read and write, whereas my father was the one who taught me what I love and things like that. Because I still read all over the place today because of that. I'll read everything from Malcolm X to Angela Davis to, the London Review of Books, to The Economist. I just feel like you should know this stuff. So when somebody says something that don't make no sense, you say, nah, man, that's not actually what happened. This is what really happened. I mean, because you got a lot of that going on here where people just saying things. So, I hope that answered that question.
When you talk about loving to read, it brought up for me that my mother's sort of favorite punishment for me was to not let me read because she knew how much I loved to read. Okay, sis, tell us your name and a question or comment, please. Stand up, please. Oh.
Hi, I appreciate your talk so far. I'm curious, what is the nature of the book? Is it a recounting of the history of poets? Is it part memoir? What is it?
It's a great question. It's trying to do a combination of, this is a good chance for me to talk about craft and storytelling. It's a combination of things. It's a history, but I feel like from a craft standpoint that the writer, a lot of time people write history and they don't tell you why this is relevant to them, or that kind of thing. I read a book years ago called Learning from the Germans, Susan Nyman. It's a great book. She's talking about what the U.S. should have done after the Civil War ended, after its so-called apartheid system was torn down. What they decided to do was rebuild it, you know what I mean, in a different way. The Nazis in Germany decided to, you know what, we're going to go and we're going to do something different. They're trying to do it. So the book's called Learning from Germany. She's saying to the U.S., you all can learn from this. But the key thing she does is she puts herself in the book and says why it's relevant to her, why she's an actor. She lives in Germany. She grew up in the South in Atlanta, so she knows the dirty, wicked Confederate history that's out there right in your face. I mean, they got hit statues of these people who were killing people up there. In Germany, they tore all that shit down. You know what I mean? They tore it down. You can't even put a swastika up. It's against the law. They made a clear statement that what we did was evil. That's what they're trying to do. I'm not saying like it's not a neo-Nazi party over there anymore, but and so that was my approach, was to try to put myself in it a little bit. So it's somewhat, almost all the chapters, I talk about why this section, what it means to me as an actor in the poetry field, that kind of thing. But then there's some raw history, Sterling Brown, his life, Warren Cooney, parts of his life, Dunbar, Langston Hughes, all those people are in the book as well. So, and then it's also and this came during the editorial process, some literary critique of the writing, some literary critique of the period. Like Paul Laurence Dunbar's plantation melodies, people didn't like them. They didn't. So we got to say that. You know what I mean? We got to say that. We can't say like, just because he Paul Laurence Dunbar and he cool. He cool. That don't mean that people didn't like his dialect poetry. People did not like that. They didn't. Black people didn't like the dialect poetry. They didn't. So whenever that comes up, I try to say that. I try to be as honest as possible. So there's some literary criticism where people fit in the historical record, where the Black Arts Movement fits in DC. There was a Black Arts Movement in DC. There was. DC was in the middle of the Black Arts Movement as well. Howard University was doing good things during that period. I'm not saying it's not doing good things now. Of course it is. I'm just saying during that period, it was doing some different things. Stephen Henderson, if anybody ever read Understanding the New Black Poetry, if you don't have that anthology literary criticism book, Understanding the New Black Poetry, you better get your hands on it. and also his book with Mercer Cook, The Militant Black Writer. Those two books right there, you got to have those books. But that's Howard. That's what Howard University was doing in the 70s. So it's a lot of that in there as well. And then the period where I come in, I met Kenneth Carroll in October of 1988. And I didn't know until I talked to him about this book that's about when he got into the poetry scene too. I thought when I met Kenny, I said, man, dude is he looked like a veteran of the poetry scene, that kind of thing. So, but I came to find out we came along right around the same time. I mean, Darryl Stover, who couldn't make it today, Darryl Stover was there a little earlier than us. And there's some other people y'all probably heard of who were there a little earlier than us. But of course, Ethelbert is in the book, people like that. It's a lot of local poetry figures in there who have a national reputation. The late Reuben Jackson is in the book. The late Peter J. Harris is in the book. Jennifer Smith. These are like people in the 80s who were these were like my inspiration. These are the people who I said, man, I want to write something like them. You know what I mean? I mean, they might have been the same age or a little bit older, but that is a testament again to the cohesiveness of our community. That, I mean, there were people who were 20 years older than me, and they be at your workshop. You know what I mean? Y'all all in the same workshop. Y'all all it's mutual respect. You know what I mean? Mutual respect, that kind of thing. We can all learn from one another. Don't ever get to the point where you think oh man, that poet, she ain't number 22. I can't learn nothing from her. No, that's just not true. The older people can learn from younger poets, and younger poets can learn from older poets. We feel as though Lisa Pegram said she feels like our intergenerational scene is just what makes it so special. That it's just the age groups might be different, but we all see that as Peter Harris said many times, the literature is the hero. That's how I think what separates DC from a lot of scenes, because a lot of people go to New York they're like, I'm gonna go to New York and shit, man. I'm gonna blow up and shit up that much. You know what I mean? But and usually it don't happen. You know what I mean? Usually it don't happen. Usually they get 6 weeks where they did blow up or something like that. So but we always say, Kenny, I know agrees, the literature is the hero. What you write is the hero. Just like Michael Warren said, the song is the star. That's what he used to say. So
I was just saying, I'm sure you remember or know of that Haki Matabuti also taught at Howard, and in the same period. And he told me that he had a sign on his office door that said "Black Poet." There were some folks at the school who weren't too happy with that, but other questions?
Mr. Gilmore, my man.
Excuse me, what is your name, please?
I was getting ready to say that. My name is Joel Crooms. I'm a visual artist here in DC, but I'm from Newark and stuff. These brothers here, they always been welcoming. But to get to the question, you talked a lot about the people that inspired you. So yeah, is that same kind of spirit and energy? Do you see that in the coming generations of poets? Is there room for them? Because I know I meet a lot of them, and I always refer them to the American Museum. But do you think that you guys are doing your job in terms, for?
Okay. My name's William Baltimore. I want to ask Brian, how long did it take you to write the book, and what was the process?
Let's start with the first question, though, if you don't mind.
Okay, so let me answer these two questions. So I would say to Joel, I would think that we are trying to do our job. I think the American Poetry Museum is evidence of that. And I think that even Jonetta Barris has a really, really dynamic reading series going on, Midnight Rose, that she does every month. American Poetry Museum does a reading every month. And we have, at the American Poetry Museum, I'm on the board, Kenny Carroll's on the board, and we try to get poets in there across the spectrum. And it's not necessarily, American Poetry Museum is open to any poet. I mean, not just Black poets. We have a lot of Black poets, but we've had Palestinian poets. We've had, we'll probably have some Asian poets coming up soon. So we like to think that we are doing our job. And we think the city is reflects a little bit different now. The city is a little bit different now in terms of the demographics. And we think that's a positive thing. That's a good thing. It's a lot more voices here, and these communities cross over a little bit more, especially the communities of color cross over. The Asian community, Latino community, Black community, all of those. There's a little bit more crossover because they weren't there before. They weren't back in the, say, the 20s and 30s, but now they are here. And so that is definitely one of our goals. And as for my cousin, that was my cousin Billy Baltimore, who was like another big brother to me. Was always watching out for me when I was coming up, trying to keep me out of trouble. And
Didn't work, did it? You're still writing.
so I would say, as I said, the first article I wrote was the Langston Hughes article, but I didn't really see this as a book until I wrote the piece about Paul Laurence Dunbar, and it was about his first reading in D.C. And I wrote that, and I was like, I was able to find like a lot of information in a fairly expeditious manner, and it got published in a literary journal, and so that was around like 2006. So it took about 18 years to write this, and now it's almost 20 years. Like what I said before was if I found something on a news article somewhere, or if I found something or I read something or I would do searches on Google, I would do searches on all kinds of sites when the search engines started becoming in vogue. And I would just leave those alerts on and I would just get stuff. And it was like, bam. And I would just get stuff and I would just keep it, bam, print it out, that kind of thing. And I just kept at that. I mean, it's so much easier to do research now than it used to be. I mean, and I had the luck of going to law school. In law school, they teach you how to research. Let me tell you, they teach you how to research in the stacks. You learn the old way in law school. So, but it took about 18 years of research and stuff like that. And it just, I still didn't know, even it's 3 or 4 years, like 4 years ago, I still didn't know like if this was a book. And then I met an editor, and she proposed a meeting, and I met up with her, and then we talked it through. And she said, "Here's the proposal. Here's the proposal format. Go ahead and do your proposal. Send it to me, and I'll get back to you." And that's how it happened. And then it's good to have an editor in a certain way, or at least have somebody you trust. If you don't trust the editor, you should find somebody who you can trust, who will help you mold your vision of what you want to do. Because I have had literary agents before, and they steered me to the man. I'll be like, man, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Why did I hire you? You know what I mean? That shit don't even look like my book no more. You know what I mean? So what are you doing, man? You fired. You know what I mean? I'd rather have no books than allow that to go in the print. That has nothing to do with me. So, and man, luckily I did have a good editor who had an MFA, and she understood what I was trying to do. And it's always some fighting going on, you know what I mean? Y'all not taking that out, that kind of thing. So that's the best way I can answer that. Thanks a lot for that question, Billy.
Hi, my name is Kinara Phillips. I didn't know that this event was happening, but it's really cool. Um, I am a Howard alum, and I got my degree in Afro American Studies, and I am also a poet. Um, I have published two chapbooks of poetry through self-publishing, and I am working on publishing a third. And I just wanted to ask, so I know that throughout history, you know, Black people have used our words, our rhythms, our music to deal with our pain, and not just to deal with our pain, but to do something about it. Um, so I am wondering, how can we as young Black artists use our words and our um, talents to address the current political situation that we're living in?
A little question for you, Brian.
That's a loaded question. So I can honestly say that I can only go by what my own experience is in terms of, and I became a poet, but also many people know I'm also a public interest lawyer. And the reason why I did that is because I felt like I didn't want to be, I didn't fall into the James Baldwin camp of saying I'm a witness. No, I wanted to be in the shit. You know what I mean? I wanted to try to help somebody. I wanted to try to put ideas into action. I just felt like I should do that. I mean, I didn't know what it would look like. But my experience as a poet in terms of activism against the system, Kenny Carroll's here can tell you. We used to be going to anti-apartheid rallies, free Mandela rallies. We went down to we went downtown to the Klan was marching. We're like, they not coming down the street and get out of here alive kind of approach. You know what I mean? No joke. So we were poets. Yes, we were poets, but we felt like, going with the Black arts movement kind of taught us was, you still got to take action. You got to put idea to action as an artist. You do. I'm not saying like you should go downtown and set some shit on fire, something like that. But your words and your art at this moment in time, artists have to be called to action. They have to. We have to be called to action at this moment and embrace this moment and be there for each other, organize, meet. You might want to meet more than you normally would meet. You know what I mean? You might want to know what's going on all the time. It's getting crazy, to tell the truth. You can see it getting crazy. They shot somebody to death today again. I mean, this is it's not different. It's just more overt. You know what I mean? It's just more overt. Dude don't care. I mean, I might even say no names. I think the guy's a sadist, and that's just my opinion. But as an artist, you gotta you gotta like let your art reflect your experience of what's going on. Don't lie to yourself. Y'all don't lie to yourself. You're a young poet. Don't pretend like you don't see what you see. Langston Hughes said poets who write about, when crazy things were going on with him, he said poets who write about flowers and bees and trees, they live in a very dull life. And that's out there for people. And it might be a way where you can work that in and be more of an activist poet or activist painter or activist photographer or activist whatever it is that you do, activist dancer. But art is becoming very, very important right now. It is, because they're trying to shut down dissent. The newspapers are all owned by the state at this point. I won't even say the state. I don't know who owns them, but they don't help the people. They don't speak to our needs. They don't speak to what we have going on in our daily lives. The corporate media sector is clownish to me. So the artists, musicians, poets, dancers, writers, multimedia artists, whoever, you gotta embrace it. You gotta educate yourself, but most of all, be there for each other. It's gonna be tough. These are tough times. You're gonna need some people to reassure you that you're not imagining things. Things is going haywire. You know what I mean? The empire is in a death spiral. You might not think it is. It isn't, but it's in a death spiral, and that's why they're doing what they're doing, because this thing is on fire. You know what I mean? And they know it. And just like Martin Luther King said, he said, I told you all that. Who was that? Martin Luther King said, integrate into a burning building. You know what I mean? That's what has happened. You know what I mean? So now we say, damn, this is really wasted. They can't even keep it together. They can't even keep anything together. I know I'm ranting here. I mean, it's not a good It's not a good topic for me to talk about those people because anybody tell you, man, me and Kenny be talking all the time. It's just, man, who are y'all, man? I mean, I don't even know anymore. Are y'all human beings? You know what I mean? Yeah, right. Let's Google that joint. Yeah, that's some good constructive advice instead of the crazy things I was saying. Please, let's get going. There's mics. So let's try to taste this. Okay, and I'm going to run the mic. You go. Let's just get ready.
All right, I'm Jeff Kennedy. For people who don't know me, it's been a pleasure watching you go through this process of getting this book together. I thank you for helping me out in my legal situation that's been going on for about 20 years. But that poetry book that you've written, I can't wait to jump into it. I haven't had much of an opportunity, but I do know that you was always like, I gotta write my book. I gotta write my book. I gotta turn this in. I gotta turn this in. So it's good to have someone who will keep you on deadline. And you said something earlier, and I want to make a little correction. You said that some people, and what you said was true, that some people blow up. The process of blowing up already starts right now. You already are. It's just a matter of people hearing your voice and you being out there for whatever reason people need to hear your voice. So they are those who have gone forward. I see you, Holly. I see you. I'm coming. They are those who want to go forward in your generation and our generation and other generations. But I want to congratulate you on getting this book out there because you've always been an individual who I thought just had all kinds of skills. So thank you, brother.
Okay, Brian, before you answer, we need
Am I
some management here. Go ahead.
on my turn? Okay. I'm Kimberly Collins. I'm a professor at Howard and a poet. And when I came and read the book yesterday here at Sankofa, was not the book that I expected to read. I don't know. I thought it was a collection of poems. So when the first thing I read was about Dunbar and how he came to poetry. And so I gave that assignment to my students who didn't show up to class yesterday and told them that they had to show up here. And but I'm saying that I feel like it's a good textbook for me for my intro to poetry class, and wanted to know how else did you see this book being used?
Oh yeah, so I saw it in that way too, as a teaching, as something people could use for teaching as well as read it. Me and the editor talked that through, and she said she wanted it to be like that too. People could use it for teaching in class, but also they could read it and learn some history. And then there's some a lot of history there, and then there's a lot in there about my own development as a writer. So I do hope if any teachers are in the room that they will adopt this book and teach it, and hopefully there will be people who will be inspired enough to take pieces of this book and go deep. You know, maybe make a film. There's so many figures in that book who are underappreciated, like Owen Dodson, who's a big time playwright, he taught at Howard for like 40 years. I mean, he could have got more treatment in the book as well. He was a poet as well. And there's so many other people in the book like that, people who I like to call unsung heroes. So great question there, Kimberly. And of course, you're mentioned in the book as well. There's so many people in the book who could have got more treatment in the book. But, you know, ultimately, I was the one telling the story from my perspective. So I tried to do my best there and be fair to everybody who was in the mix. And I hope people will check it out. Even if you're an academic, I feel like the book is for you. If you're just a person who wants to read about history, about how this scene became what it became, who's Sterling Brown, who's Gene Toomer, who's Mae Miller. I mean, there's so many poets in there who are, I guarantee you the school system doesn't know about these people, and they grew up in this town and used to run these streets and write their poetry. Warren Cuny wrote No Images, the most famous poem in the history of the Harlem. He is, I was able to track down a great portion of his story. So there's so many people in there like that.
Um, Sure. Hi, Erica James. Thank you for the talk. I appreciate the historical context that you've situated your work in. It's really interesting to me. And along that vein, clearly we've been here before. Art, whether it's music or poetry, have been used to fuel like activism that in moments like we're in right now. My question is, how can it evolve to meet the demands of the present moment? I believe that insanity is repeating the same thing over results, right? That's nothing new. That's not my original quote, but it's like, how can we come together and utilize poetry as an art form to like inspire people to do something? Because I feel like, a lot of us, quote unquote, Black people were kind of like on the sidelines. We're not out marching and being as active as we have in the past, but this is the space where I think that we've always led. And I really appreciate, I look forward to, reading the book and learning more about the architecture that you've laid out, like socially, economically. But yeah, that's question is different this time.
My question is remarkably related to that, but a different question, which is just how do you think about I'm David Camp, by the way. How do you think about the modernity and the challenges and opportunities created by the algorithm as a universal factor, AI as another factor affecting people, and the algorithm affects language, and it obviously affects poetry, and even the way that people either go to bookstores or buy books online, which obviously affects a community of poets. So so it's related to that, which is just how do you think about more broadly the challenges and opportunities created by modernity as it affects poetry and its potential to help foster liberation or just expression?
Those are some tough questions. I would say this. First of all, I would say you are right about the insanity thing, doing the same thing. So I don't think we'll be able to do the same thing. I just don't think that's the way to go with this. You want to have that same spirit, but you're probably going to need something different. And that's the reason why hopefully we'll be able to engage the younger generation coming up, because they're far more, and this might even go to your question too, they're far more technologically savvy than a guy like me, who people say I look like Frederick Douglass. But I'm just saying that the new generation coming along, we have to engage them. And I think that's the answer. I don't profess to know how that will happen, but you are absolutely correct that insanity to try to do it the same way like the Black Arts Movement did it or the Harlem Renaissance do it. We're in another stage of that now. Anyway, we're at another stage of that now. We're supposed to actually be equal, but we're not, and there's no effort to reignite that or anymore. And in fact, they're going backwards. But as for the second question, that is a great question, and it's an academic. I'm an academic, and I teach pre-law courses, and all of that. What you're saying is relevant to all language at this point. Me and Kenny talk about it all the time. Me and many other people talk about it all the time. What will happen? What's going to happen? Are books going to just continue to take on less and less relevance? Is everybody going to be reading on pads and those kind of things? I don't know. And the whole notion of the algorithms that control who will come to this event today, those kind of things. That's again probably a question that I don't have. It's beyond my pay grade, as they say. I just don't know what is going to happen. But the fact that you raise it we cannot ignore the technology that's here in our face. We cannot, but we got to figure that out in some way. But I don't know how to fix that. You know what I mean?
Hi, my name is Verna Avery Brown. I'm a hostess at I host WPNews What's at Stake Radio, and this is a question that's definitely in your pay grade. Uh, this is a softball question, so I wait till the end. But I'm a native Washingtonian on both sides. Mom and dad are both native Washingtonians, and growing up hearing stories about Dunbar High School. And I'm wondering if you can quickly address the racial dynamics of that school and how much of that is urban legend and how much of that is fact.
I would say it's probably a lot of it's true. There's been some. I came across some dissertations in my research for the book where they did talk about some of that is true. I think one of them is called the paper principle, but they're talking about the whole New Orleans brown bag thing was going on at Dunbar as well. My mother went to Dunbar and she said the same thing but my mother is very light. So, but she said there was some of that going on there. It was hard to gauge how much was going on there, but it's not totally urban legend that there was a color class system in the city. And Dunbar writes, Paul R. Dunbar came here from Dayton, Ohio, and he's very dark. And he said that was in existence here. He did say that. So it might be, the answer to that might be it's a mix. Yeah, it's true, but to what degree it's hard to say. Because my recollection is anecdotal. My mother and her classmates would be around and they would say, yeah, that was true. That was true. And Dunbar said it was true. But then other people said it wasn't true. So I don't know. But I did read a dissertation about it, and that person claimed that it was true. And they talked to a lot of graduates of Dunbar. Yep.
Okay. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Jeanette. I'm Pearl. Congrats on this book, and thank you for all the work that you put into it. When I was reading the description for this event, it talked about this book, you doing a lot of interviews for it, and the oral historian in me got very excited and wanted to know how doing those interviews, one, what it brought up for you, and two, how it may cause maybe a shift in how you did and how you recollected your own experiences.
So I did conduct a lot of interviews, and some people I interviewed Kenny for this. I interviewed a bunch of people. I did surveys and stuff where people could answer questions. We didn't have to meet. I interviewed Dolores Kendrick, extensive interview with her and things like that. And you do find things out, and you're like, okay, so that's different. The facts is different than I heard on the street, kind of thing. Like Gaston Neal, who's famous. I didn't get a chance to interview him, but Gaston Neal's story is so funny. Is Gaston Neal told all these crazy stories when he was a poet, and then it's so funny when I interviewed other people, all his stories checked out as true, which is so interesting that they were accurate. But then, like when I talked to Kenny, it was like, I thought Kenny had been around a really long time on the poetry scene. Turns out that wasn't true. So there was a lot of that adjusting of the facts and things like that. But then it also goes back to what I said before about if you start doing something, keep the stuff. Like Dolores Kendrick, I didn't interview Dolores Kendrick thinking I was going to have a book. I interviewed Dolores Kendrick because I had a chance to interview her. And then I just kept the tape. And then when this came up, I was like, oh, shit. So now I need to, hopefully this tape is not warped and messed up. And it wasn't. And I transcribed the whole interview. I should have told them to include her interview and put it in the back, but whatever. But you do, what ends up happening is you find out stuff and you're like, it really, really didn't happen like that. It didn't happen like that. So-and-so was not there, or that person was not there. Like, it was one of the arguments was always about Stokely. Was Stokely in DC? It's broke out. It turns out he probably was, because I mean, I had like a couple sources who said, yeah, he was there. You know what I mean? He was there. Some people said, no, he wasn't in DC. He left. He came down and gave a speech and then he left town. No, it's pretty clear that he's probably still here. So it's just stuff like that. But you want to know the facts. So
Hello, I'm Morgan Joyner. I graduated from Howard last spring and I studied history. And I'm also friends and coworkers with your daughter, Lyric. But I was just curious. I appreciated earlier how you said, like you were intentional about inserting yourself alongside the history, like inserting your interest into it. And I'm just curious how you approach getting other people interested in history.
that's a great question. I mean, I would say a lot of people were quite reluctant they didn't think that what I was talking about was all that big of a deal. I did do like send out questionnaires and stuff, and people who responded, those are the ones who I knew were interested in the topic, and I would follow up with them, and then we would talk. Maybe we would talk in person, or maybe we would do emails. But that's really what it is you kind of have to gauge the interest of people who are interested in your topic. And some people are just not going to ever respond. Some people who I wish would have responded and they didn't respond. And I hope they don't complain or trash me when they're not hardly in the book. And I'm saying, well, I sat there and emailed you like 5 times and you never responded. So, but that's really what you're trying to gauge is you'll be able to tell who is interested in your topic and in your story.
Okay, what I want to ask is, in case the family, sister, if you want to say something, why you don't say something, his brother and the 2 daughters, you want to say something, folks? You're good? Are you sure? Okay, sister. How about daughters? I know it's in the back there. Good, thank you. Can you give her a mic?
Okay, this on. Hello, my name is Lyric Gilmore. I'm the MC middle child, as I was told earlier. So a moment ago, towards the beginning of the Q&A, someone asked about your mother and how she inspired your reading and writing. I think I'm curious if you want to talk to the room a little bit about how you taught me to read and write. Did you?
Thank you, sister. I knew I was expecting something.
I will say I would give more credit to her mother for the reading and writing. And yeah, I was, I read to my children, all of them, and I encouraged them to write. I felt like it's better for me to show an example of reading and writing. But their mother, Alana, is the one who really, really pushed a lot on them. I would say pushed a lot of books and still does. We still do. I mean, I don't think we're ruthless or anything like that. But I definitely encouraged them to, encourage them more like for the arts in general. It could be the arts. You didn't necessarily have to be writing, but art is power. It belongs to the people. That's what we got. All the questions earlier about the art, we gotta lean into the arts now because all the other institutions are poisoned at this point. They're not hopelessly poisoned, but right now they're poisoned. So, but I give the credit to their mother mostly, but I had my role. Definitely. I had my role, my moment.
Well, I just want to say a few things on behalf of our bookstore here. With a backstory. First, I want to thank both of you. Congratulations, sister. You've always supported us. I hope you do more often. Moderate writers, as you've always done here.
My pleasure, Ali.
You know how we know this guy because the backstory he talks about is what's very important. My wife, that was dying in Guinea, we put everything we have at the disposal of filming him before he died. We have filmed him before, but she wanted to go there to film him. And there was a lot of sabotage. Now, this is fun. It's not. These people kept losing our camera, sending a second camera, a third camera, counter to Guinea, all lost. And she still shot with whatever she could get locally in Guinea. And we went to, people you know at Howard, taught there for many years, a lawyer who grew Kwame Ture. He was Kwame Ture's classmate. We went to his office and said, we want to sue these airlines. And we had a case. And the brother asked us a retainer fee. For independent filmmakers, we cannot afford Black lawyers. That's why I'm bringing this up. We cannot afford make a movie pay Black people a portion of the money. But this was the brother who came through to save us when we were sued once. So for me, we got to keep in touch with him always, feed him when we can, bribe him when we can, in case we get in trouble again. He is very, very important to us. He's very regular, no ego tripping. That's what I like about him. I can't stand people because there's no time to ego trip, in my view, and I have right to be impatient. So anyway, I want to also let our community know a film I've been doing for 30 years about the any. It's got, huh? Right, it's never working all the time. Okay, is it working now? So this is a film I worked 30 years of my life with my wife and me producing it. We always produce Sankofa, we produce all our films, etc. And so this film is finished. It's now going to premiere at the Berlin Film Festival. And what's very important is we don't abide by the government of Hollywood filmmaking logic. The film is 10 hours in 5 parts. And we were, if they asked us to change any of it, we wouldn't be in that festival. But this is a festival that accepted our film as is. And I'll be making about a 30 hours Maroon project, runaway Black people from not Jamaica, not the Caribbean, United States Maroon, who run all the way to Mexico, who made history, whose name are not known by our institutions even here at Howard. And so you have to know one thing about this place. He's right, we call it liberated territory. But my wife is fierce. She's a filmmaker, but she is now expanding this way. I'm busy in the editing room, but she's expanding this way to build a theater so you don't be situated like this, compacted. We want to create a small, intimate theater where we can have our stuff going. So anyway, the other thing is, please do not miss the documentary films we want to show. Her film, is it Footprints? You announced Footprints. We're going to show Sterling Brown again, hopefully with this guy in it. And I was going to ask him, did he write? For me, the first bookstore is Sterling Brown's basement, in my view, because that's where you locate a lot of the poets all the way to Newark, Baraka, etc. So I was going to ask you, if you went to that or left it for a second?
So, which was how?
His house, his basement.
So I didn't I didn't never get to meet him when he was alive, but I've been to his house because Marcia Davis lives there now.
Big story. We'll talk later. Yes. It's a big story because in his basement, he met his students that these are like Baraka caliber students in his basement. I've been in his basement when he was alive. We were filming him. So we have a film on him called After Winter, Sterling Brown.
Yes.
And we will show it here.
Yes.
We'll make sure he works his something off to show the film. I was surprised in front of his daughters. He was cursing, wasn't he? Yeah, and they didn't say nothing about it.
They're grown ass women.
My kids would choke me like this. Anyway, it's good. It's fine with me. We don't. Language here is permitted, except it has to be family friendly, etc. So anyway, I want you to also really come to our event. The thing we do is this: when we started this place, we want Black people to read film like books, the way they read books, and we have this thing called How to Read Cinema. This is where we get gypped off from 100 years oppression of cinematic colonialism. You don't know how much they have affected us. For over 100-something years, Hollywood has existed. Black people were the immediate targets of its grammar. So we want us to really, audiences to read our films, read Black films, not just because it has Black people in it, but what is the subtext of all this narrative logic. So the coup d'etat thing uses jazz, soundtrack to coup d'etat, and it's a very deceptive film. So we have young people here who have gone over the film for over 10 times to discuss the narrative logic where it's deceptively profiling us when in fact it may not say what we think it's saying. And this is the problem. So please join us when we do film screenings because we discuss the logic of reading cinema. And again, on this weather for coming, seriously, I was very worried about my brother here because I was saying, are we sure people are coming today? And so thank you so much for this brother. You turned up, in my view. You know, he's a good soul, a nice human being. You saw him today here. This is as he is, no game to him. Thank you again for coming. Please drive carefully.